My closest colleague was taking credit for my projects and management meetings I was not invited to. I found out when I was congratulated for a presentation I had never given. What I found changed what I thought I knew about 4 years of collaboration. There are invisibilities that build up gradually, that do not happen in a single dramatic moment, that are the result of a series of small decisions, each of which separately can have a reasonable explanation, but that together have a logic that when you see it complete is impossible not to recognize. Ernesto had spent 4 years being my closest colleague, the one who understood my methodologies because I had explained them to him, the one who knew my analyses because we had discussed them together before I formalized them, the one who knew exactly which projects I was leading because we shared workspace and because I, with the generosity of someone who trusts, told him what I was working on. And that information had been reaching management meetings where my name did not appear, where the name that appeared was his. My name is Adriana. I am 42 years old. I am a senior systems auditor at a software development company with 280 employees. I have been with the company for 7 years. Ernesto is 45 years old. He is a process auditor in the same department. We have spent 4 years working in the same area with projects that sometimes overlap and sometimes run parallel. The technology director's name was Isabel. She was 53 years old. She had been with the company for 8 years. She was the person before whom I wanted my work to be visible. The moment that changed everything was a Wednesday morning in the hallway. Isabel saw me on her way to the conference room. She stopped. She smiled at me with the warmth of someone who wants to say something positive. She told me the presentation of the payment system's vulnerability analysis had seemed very solid to her, that the risk stratification methodology I had used was exactly what the board had needed to see, that she had been pleased Ernesto had presented it on her behalf. I stood looking at her for a moment. I asked which meeting that had been. Isabel told me the risk committee meeting the previous Friday, that Ernesto had said I had not been able to attend, but that he was presenting on my behalf with my authorization. I told her I appreciated her words, that I would gladly tell her more about the methodology when we had a moment. Isabel said that would be fine, and kept walking. I stayed standing in the hallway for a moment longer than usual. The payment system's vulnerability analysis was mine. I had developed it over 3 weeks. It had been the most intensive work I had done that year so far. I had been waiting to formally present it to management. I was waiting to be scheduled for the right meeting. I had not given Ernesto authorization to present it. I had not told him I could not attend any meeting, because I had not been invited to any risk committee meeting the previous Friday. I went to my computer. I searched the corporate calendar for the risk committee meeting from the previous Friday. It was scheduled. The listed attendees did not include my name. They included Ernesto's. I did not go to Ernesto immediately. What I did was look for whether there had been other high-level meetings in recent months where Ernesto had been present and I had not. Meetings that corresponded to projects that were mine or that we had developed together in discussions where I had been the intellectual lead. What I found over the following 2 days was a pattern. In the last 8 months, there were 4 management meetings where Ernesto had presented content corresponding to my projects or to analyses we had developed in joint discussions where I had been the intellectual lead. In none of the 4 had I been invited. In all of them, I had had conversations with Ernesto in the preceding days where I had told him what I was working on. I looked for the minutes of those 4 meetings. The corporate minutes recorded the presenter for each agenda item. In all 4, Ernesto appeared as presenter. In none did my name appear as the source of the analysis or the project presented. I spoke with the executive assistant who managed the high-level meeting calendars. I asked casually how it was determined who was invited to risk committee meetings. She told me the department head sent the attendee list at least 4 days in advance. The head of our department was named Ricardo. I went to Ricardo. I told him I wanted to understand how the area's representation in risk committee meetings was managed. Ricardo told me the process was that whoever had the relevant projects presented directly, that if for some reason the responsible person could not attend, whoever could best represent the work was found. I asked whether there had been situations in recent months where Ernesto had requested to represent my projects. Ricardo took a while. He told me Ernesto had mentioned on some occasions that I had scheduling conflicts. that he had offered to present in my place. That Ricardo had assumed I was aware. I told him there had been no scheduling conflicts, that I had not been informed of those meetings, that I had not authorized Ernesto to present on my behalf. Ricardo looked at me with the expression of someone who has just understood they made a decision without verifying something they should have verified. The conversation with Ernesto at that same day, not at the end of the day, in the afternoon, because what he had found was not something that called what for more processing. He told him Isabel had congratulated me for the vulnerability analysis presentation, that she had told me you had presented it on my behalf with my authorization, that he had not given him that authorization, that he had not been informed of that meeting. Ernesto did not deny it immediately. There was a silence that was long enough to say what the words were not yet saying. Then he told me I thought it was better for the analysis to reach management than not to reach them, that they had the opportunity and had taken it, that they had thought he would be happy the work had reached where it needed to go. He asked me whether I had thought about telling me beforehand. He told me I thought about doing it, that I had not found the right moment. He asked him whether in the other 4 meetings where I had presented my work he had also thought about telling me beforehand. Another silence. Ernesto told me he was sorry, that I had not seen it in the way he was describing it. He told him he was going to describe it clearly so we could all be sure he understood. That I had presented my work as his honor on my behalf without my knowledge or authorization on 5 occasions. That I had built a reputation before a management based partly on work that was not his. That I had actively created the condition for me not to be present by telling Ricardo he had scheduling conflicts that did not exist. That was not taking advantage of an opportunity. It was actively constructing my invisibility. Ernesto did not respond. He went to Ricardo the following day. He presented him with the complete pattern with documentation, the 5 meetings, the dates, the content presented versus the projects he had led. Ernesto's statement that he had reported scheduling conflicts that did not exist. Ricardo listened. He told me what he was describing was serious, that it was going to take the matter to human resources and to Isabel, that the formal process would determine the consequences, that he asked me not to take any additional unilateral action while the process developed. The formal process took 3 weeks. Ernesto received a formal reprimand. A protocol was established where any representation of another team member's projects in management meetings required written confirmation from that person. It was included in the permanent attendee list of the risk committee for projects in my area. Isabel had a meeting with me where she asked me to present directly to her the projects he had led over the last 8 months. That meeting was the most important of my year at the company. Not because it changed everything that had happened, but because it established a direct visibility that had not existed before. What cost me most of the entire process was not the confrontation with Ernesto. It was the period between when he discovered what had happened and when the formal process ended. 3 weeks where he knew what he knew, where he continued working in the same space as Ernesto, where he had to manage the anger in a way that did not destroy the formal process that was underway. That period was the hardest, not dramatically, with the specific difficulty of someone who has to keep being professional in an environment where something important has broken. The working relationship with Ernesto exists because we are still in the same department. It does not have the same nature it had. I do not share the details of my projects with him in the same way as before. Not because I am vengeful, but because what happened showed me that generosity with information about my work in that specific context had been used in a way he had not chosen. That information changes what I choose to share. What I want you to take from this story as parts for people in different positions. For those who work in corporate environments where visibility before management matters for career development. The visibility of your work does not happen on its own. It requires you to be present in the spaces where that work is seen. If you are not being invited to those spaces, the question of why is worth asking directly. Not as paranoia, as conscious management of your own career. For those who lead teams or manage representation in high-level meetings. Verifying directly with the person responsible for a project before allowing someone else to represent it is not bureaucracy. It is the minimum control that prevents exactly what is described in this story. And for everyone, generosity with information about your work in competitive environments as a cost that is not always visible until it is. Sharing what you are developing, with colleagues can produce genuine collaboration. And they can produce what it produced here. The difference is sometimes not visible until the pattern appears. If this story impacted you, comment. Have you had in your career the experience of your work reaching visibility spaces in your company without you being present and without receiving the corresponding credit? Like if you believe a company should have explicit protocols for the representation of other people's projects in management meetings. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who works in a corporate environment and who might benefit from being more conscious about the visibility of their work. Practical tip: if you work in an environment where there are periodic management or high-level committee meetings, ask your area head explicitly whether there are upcoming meetings where your work might be relevant and whether you will be included in the attendee list. That simple question can reveal whether there are meetings happening without you where your work is being presented. Do not want to be passively invited when something important is at stake.